John, it's time to go in depth on a story we reported to you earlier. The shocking and disturbing tale out of Wisconsin, where a 12-year-old was stabbed 19 times, allegedly by two friends who apparently were out to prove something to a mythical cyber character named Slender Man. Joining us now to discuss this, as well as other legal stories of great import, it's Newsmax legal analyst Michelle Suskauer. Counselor, we're happy to have you back. We're sorry we have to begin with a story just as bizarre as this one.
This is a terrible story, and it's always awful when we hear about young people who are committing violent acts. And so it's a difficult situation where you have these two 12-year-olds who then stabbed multiple times, I think 19 times, another 12-year-old. Now, I know that she's in, I think, stable condition. Thank God she didn't pass away as a result. But now we have, in Wisconsin, two children who are being charged as adults and facing the adult system for this very violent act.
Well, it prompts so many questions, Michelle, beginning with freedom on the internet and these websites. And I understand that the argument can be made about television or any electronic device. You can turn it off, you can walk away, and yet you have this where I would imagine as their defense, they're going to say, hey, the website prompted these girls to be involved in this.
And that may be something that they could use potentially as mitigation, but again, there were some statements and there may be a question as to, you know, whether they read their Miranda, what they understand, statements about remorse or lack of remorse, planning. So it's going to be very, very interesting. But certainly it's an alarm to many parents, to parents of teenagers and preteens about what they're viewing on the internet. But does that absolve them of, you know, this criminal act? And of course the state is going to say no, and that's why we've charged them as adults. But again, there's a question as to children versus adults, and how do we treat children who commit violent crimes in the adult system? And the Supreme Court actually has been dealing with that, about children and how they should be treated differently than adults in the system.
Well, as we continue to grapple with that question, it is worth noting that the administrators of this cyber site certainly got proactive trying to address reports of their website's involvement. Here's the statement that the cyber site administrators released. First, and most importantly, my condolences go out to all the families involved. I cannot even imagine how painful and confusing and awful this has to be for them. I can imagine how my mother would feel if something like this happened to me, and it absolutely breaks my heart to even consider her having to go through that. The families of the young ladies who committed this crime also have my heart going out to them. I know this can't be easy for them as well, and I'm sure they'll have to deal with mistargeted backlash and anger even while they try to get through such a trying time themselves. It's hard to justify pinning blame on an entire genre of writing, unless you're okay with blaming the world's ills on Stephen King or H.P. Lovecraft. I don't believe that it makes sense to say paranormal writing or an interest in the macabre should be blamed or even used as an indicator of a sick person. So that's the response from the administrator of the website. Maybe the administrator's got a future in politics. He's spinning like a whirling dervish in this thing.
Well, certainly, you know, because their particular character was utilized as sort of the driving force potentially of this crime, that they were trying to prove themselves to this fictional character Slender Man, and that Slender Man exists or doesn't exist. But again, we've had defendants who've blamed things on a variety of different, you know, computer games and all types of different type of genre. But again, that doesn't always necessarily work, that's going to be the defense. It would be, in my opinion, mitigation based on their young age and how impressionable they are.
Now, Michelle, earlier you talked about the Supreme Court and the issue of trying minors as adults, and that's what's happening here initially in this case here. But we're talking about 12-year-olds. Is there a different burden of proof, or is there a different criteria that the prosecutors would use when you make a decision as to charge a 12-year-old as an adult as opposed to, say, a 16-year-old? Does the court differentiate?
Well, you know, there are it varies really from state to state in terms of, but again, it is within the prosecutor's discretion as to whether or not to charge children as juveniles or adults. And even though, for example, in the state of Florida, even if someone is charged as an adult, as a 12-year-old, they could still be sentenced as a juvenile. So it really is different state by state as to what is appropriate and the factors that they look at. But on a case where there's that type of violence, and what the prosecutors are probably going to look at as some sophistication in planning, then it would seem pretty likely that they would be charged as adults. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they should be treated as adults in terms of any potential sentencing.
Michelle, a question partly personal, just in terms of your practice as a criminal defense attorney.
Sure.
I know that judges are supposed to look at each case anew and afresh, but at times when different attorneys come up with different theories or tactics of defense or explanations, some of them become so absurd, it appears upon first reading, that it might prejudice an outlook of a judge. I know it's not supposed to happen. I offer that as a preamble for your editorial comment, just between us. If you could comment on this, and if the bar, if restrictions of the bar don't allow
Right.
you to,
Well,
what is the most absurd legal defense you've ever heard in a criminal case?
Oh gosh, you know, I mean, look, as a criminal defense lawyer, I don't want to say that there are any defenses that are absurd if they are successful. But no, absolutely. Look, there are some that you have to have good faith in what you are presenting in court. And in this particular very unfortunate situation, if these girls had that mental, the mental impressionability to be swayed by this, that will be brought up in court.
All right, guys, we want to also talk about a story, Michelle, that I'm sure you've been focusing on, considering you practice law in the state of Florida. Brevard County in northern Florida, there was an interesting case, and we have some video of that. If we could get to that real quick. A judge, John Murphy, and an assistant public defender were discussing the next steps in a case. Take a listen to the exchange between the judge and we didn't obviously like what the attorney, or how the attorney was addressing him.
This is an emergency
if I
created
had
by
a
the
rock,
state.
I would throw it at you right now.
You know, this is
Stop pissing me off. Just sit down. I'll take care of it. I don't need your help.
No,
sit
you know
down.
what? I'm the public defender. I have a right to be here, and I have a right to stand
said
and represent
sit
my
down.
clients.
If you want to fight, let's go out back and I'll just be
Let's
Well then, I mean, I guess you could say maybe only in Florida would something like this happen. Florida has a bad rep, but
Well, it's, you know, I have to tell you, and having watched this and been speaking about this, I am very, very upset. I mean, we all, you know, some people are laughing, but again, this is very, very serious. And this judge is going to have some serious repercussions potentially as a result of this action. You know, to be an officer of the court, to be in charge of your courtroom, if you lose your temper, and tempers flare all the time in court, but you lose your temper, get off the bench, calm down. Compose yourself. It's not a bar. It's not a bar brawl. And that's really how it was treated. If this attorney was being disrespectful, there are other ways to control the attorney by maybe holding the attorney in contempt or warning the attorney or telling the attorney, please leave the courtroom. As opposed to, if I had a rock, I would throw it at your head right now and let's go outside. And he beat him up. But you know what? If the public defender was the one who actually hit the judge, he would have been arrested.
oh, of course. Now, could this jeopardize the case here?
Well, that particular case was just in the infancy in terms of whether it's going to trial or not, and that's going to be reassigned to another judge.
Yeah, I was going to say
another attorney.
Yeah, reassign both judge and attorney. We've got a couple of minutes. We'd be remiss if, speaking of getting new attorneys, you have the situation with Sergeant Tamarusi, who is incarcerated in Mexico.
Right.
He had a lawyer that he fired after a preliminary hearing. Now he's in a Mexican courtroom today. Will this end up being more of an international case for diplomats to decide, or will Mexican law triumph in this case?
Oh gosh, I hope it's going to be a diplomatic solution here to try to just get him out. It seems like that he's been in Mexican custody since March, I believe, the end of March.
31st, yep.
And he's still in custody. So I don't know how much faith the United States puts in the Mexican criminal justice system. They do have some rights as defendants, and he is being given, I believe, a new attorney. But again, I think people are hoping that there's going to be a diplomatic solution to this and that he's going to be released. This doesn't seem like this was an intentional act.
Well, when I was serving as a member of Congress in the border state of Arizona, we would have situations with constituents where the Mexicans seem to lock up people first and ask questions later. So let's hope cooler heads prevail in terms of diplomacy. Not that, Counselor, you wouldn't be the perfect diplomat to go
I agree.
take care of this.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
All right. Oh, we've got the shingle hanging out here, metaphorically speaking. We always appreciate your help, Michelle Suskauer.
Sure, my pleasure.
So, the case of the Marine in Mexico, the case of the judge jumping ugly in Brevard County in Florida, and the horrific case in Wisconsin. Your take on any or all of those cases, we'd love to hear from you. Why don't you tweet us your comments at Newsmax TV, hashtag America's Forum. There's also email, again, no stamp required, connect@newsmaxtv.com is our address. And let's not forget Facebook, facebook.com/Newsmax. And we're coming right back.